Hi. Before going to video, please subscribe to my channel for more interesting stuff. And the question is, individuals of Reddit who have experienced crazy sightings such as aliens, cryptids, humanoids, UFOs, black silhouettes aka the shadow people, Dogman, Mothman, stairs in the woods etc. What stories can you share?
Driving on the highway in Ontario, Canada late in the night. We pulled over off the highway so one of us could make a pit stop. As my friend was urinating, I saw a tall figure in the trees walking around. It started getting closer to my friend who was just off the highway in the bush. I rolled down the window and told my friend, "There's something in the trees coming at you, get back to the car." My friend sees it and decides to whistle at it. Sure enough, the thing whistles back. It sounded like it was whistling and humming at the same time. My friend yelled in terror and ran back to the car. We were out of there fast down the highway. Edit, spelling. Grew up in northern Ontario as well, and spent a lot of time in the bush growing up. I remember walking with friends near one of their camps. I would have been 10, and one of our friends saw a figure up on a ledge. I turned my head up to see something large and black or brown disappear from view. We were then pelted with chunks of shale for about 10 minutes as we cowered behind some boulders. Some of the chunks hurled down were pretty huge. Another time I was in the bush with my uncle. He'd grown up outdoors and knew every animal, and their behaviors. The man could track them. We were walking along a creek looking for rainbow trout and heard a series of screams off in the distance. I was terrified, he was perplexed. They didn't sound human, nor did they sound like any of the native animals of the region. They went on for a few minutes and disappeared. Several minutes later they started again, except now they were about 100 fucking feet away. Needless to say, we made it back to the truck fast. I think a lot of people don't understand just how massive swathes of Canada are. Emo, a yet undiscovered animal, could be living in there with ease, especially if it has the capacity to recognize and avoid humans. I moved into a new place around 15 and kept hearing scratching noises and rustling outside. I always assumed it was animals. One year, we had to put up some defense on the window, don't remember why, and my father said the grass and bushes around my window were like how a carpet is after you step on it, and he said that the tracks belonged to either a human or something with human feet. This was years after the first time I heard the rustling and scratching. To know that someone was outside my window still terrifies me. When I went to stay with my uncle for the weekend, we took his dog for a walk 3 times a day, once in the morning, once before lunch and one at like 10 to 11 p.m. So he lives in a rural area of England, like lots of farms, tight country lanes, and at night it gets very dark. So we come along to a small fence, he lifts the dog over and I just hop over as I'm pretty tall. We start walking along and end up in an orchard. As it gets darker, I turn my phone light on and look around. I feel as if something is watching me but could feel it was quite close. I look to left and down the aisles of trees I see something very tall and humanoid walk past, as if it was following me and my uncle. I turned to him and said, "Did you see that too?" and I point to the trees, and he replied with kind of yeah. We carry on walking and get to near the end. He sees the trees sway, as do I. The humanoid being was watching us. It must have been at least 8 foot tall. It was staring back at us, and as the dog started barking in its direction, the being walked off after the dog stopped barking. My family and I saw a woman staring into a window once. It was late night, past midnight. We live in a remote, little town called Salton City. There are many houses here that halted construction midway. This was one of those houses. The woman was wearing a long white dress, and had long straight black hair. Very stereotypical of a horror movie. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it, and my parents do not talk about it to this day. They are religious people, and I think this really freaked them out. One afternoon during my senior year in high school, a friend of mine and I were hanging out on my back porch. I forget which of us noticed it first, but we saw a cylindrical-shaped, spinning object traversing the sky. It was low enough so that we could clearly see its shape and color, white, but made no sound whatever. My friend actually tried to call the airport and ask them if they saw any anomaly, which of course, they didn't. So who knows what that thing was. I've seen 2 UFOs in the night sky over the years, both over fairly isolated wilderness. The first was what appeared to be a shooting star that grew progressively brighter as it moved across the sky before dimming back to its original brightness and continuing its path. I mentioned it to a friend and he claimed to have seen the same thing a different time, and said it was the sunlight reflecting off the solar panels of the International Space Station at just the right angle. The other object was what appeared to be 4 specks of fire moving across the night sky side by side and completely silent. They looked like the afterburners of a jet plane, but given the distance between the specks it would have had to be the size of a commercial airliner, which don't have afterburners, and flying low enough that I should have been able to hear something. I never found out what it was, but I'd put money on it being kind of secret military stealth plane. Edit. I doubt it was Chinese lanterns. I was camping in the Boundary Waters about a day's travel by canoe from the nearest sign of civilization. Whatever the lights were, they came from deeper in the wilderness, moving towards the town. Back in the late 80s, we went on a field trip in the rural Midwest to a lake. We spent the day hiking, fishing, sunbathing, whatever. However, on the way there, we were on a school bus on a backcountry road. There were two cylindrical-shaped or cigar-shaped things in the sky. They looked metallic. They were quite some distance away, but they looked fucking massive, like a half-dozen large passenger airplanes end-to-end type massive, probably bigger than that. I grew up on the ocean and am fully aware without a frame of reference it is tough to judge size and distance of large objects. The surface looked to have shading and slight differences in appearance, like maybe the object wasn't smooth, but no wings or other aircraft features. The only frame of reference I had was a big-ass hill. These things were behind the hill and seemed just as big. The funny thing is everyone saw them, but no one wanted to acknowledge it. For a second, I thought I was seeing shit and was going to ask the kid next to me if he saw it, but I looked and saw him staring at them. I asked him what they were and got a shrug and I don't know. I wish there was a cool ending, like we were shot at by lasers or we were abducted and forced to fight to the death, but we just drove and eventually they were out of sight. What were they? I have no idea. I have never seen anything that sized in the sky before or since, much less two of them. I've worked at racetracks and seen blimps overhead, and that isn't even close for size. I've worked at airports and even the biggest planes aren't close. The science part of me will always wonder what those were, but the rational part of me knows I'll never find the answer. Okay, this reminds me of when I was 16, I was spending the night at my friend's house down about 2 miles from my house, as I often did. I was addicted to World of Warcraft, so every night I would get up at around 3 to 4 a.m. and ride my bike home and go play WoW. One night I woke up like normal, snuck out of the house, grabbed my bike and rode home. About halfway there a massive object flashes into view and stops right over me and our town like it came out of hyperspace from the direction behind me. It was completely silent. When I say massive, I mean bigger than our town by a lot. Could barely see end to end. It looked as though it was in space and had to be 100 miles long. It was shaped like a long oval. It was black but almost oily, looking like rainbow colors on the edges that seemed to change like oil does. I stopped, dropped my bike, and just stared at it. I'm not sure how long I stood there, but it seemed like 30 seconds. Then, like hyperspace in Star Wars, it took off in an instant, continuing on in the direction it was heading before it stopped. Again, no sound. It was gone in a second. I sat there for 5 minutes not sure what to do. Then continued home to play WoW. This happened in Western Oregon. I sadly don't remember the exact date. If anyone has seen this, please let me know. Another time, me and my buddy were outside my house at night in my driveway smoking a cigarette, around the same age. We look and see these 5 green lights in a circle flashing in different sequences like it was communicating a message. Can't tell how far away it was, but it seemed far, and the circumference of the lights were about the size of the moon. It went on for a few minutes and then stopped. Never saw anything like that again. Both these nights I don't remember there being a moon out, but I could be mistaken. One last thing, I was in my bed and had been lying there awake for a few minutes trying to go to bed. Then from the end of my bed where my feet are, my blankets were being slowly pulled off and towered the ground from a central location, like someone was grabbing my blanket with one hand. I sit up and see it happening, but it's too dark to see past the edge of my bed. Once the blanket was almost completely off my body, I reached down, grabbed my blanket and ripped them up and over my body and head and forced pass out of pure fear. I live next to a railway crossing, and when I was around 10 they installed floodlights on the crossing and they shone directly into my window, so I could always see silhouettes of the trees or something very clearly, like a puppet show. One night I had a sleepover with 2 friends. At some point during the night a figure appeared crouching in my window. My friends and I were terrified. In the point of context, there is nothing outside my window for anyone to stand on. The figure also had elongated body parts. The part I remember most was a pointy head. It stayed crouched in the window for a while and we hid under the covers and peeped out occasionally. Sometime later we saw it jump to the side. I put this down to a dream. It couldn't have been real. The floodlight eventually got turned so it didn't face my window. My friends and I grew up and grew apart. At the end of secondary school I was getting people to sign my yearbook and one of the girls asked me if I remembered the thing in my window. I was shocked. I thought it was a dream, so I asked the other girl and she also remembered it. That night I told my dad about it. He told me the floodlights have never faced my window. Just to let you know, I posted a more detailed story a little while back on r/Scary Stories. I'm a mobile user. You found me, if you want to see it. My wife and another couple and I were driving on a curvy road one night, and I turned a sharp left, and what I saw was a woman covered in blood wearing a white, beat-up dress. She was in the middle of the road, so I swerved and landed in someone's yard. I thought I was going crazy, yet before I said anything everyone in the car yelled, "Did you see that?" At that point I knew I wasn't seeing shit. We all got out and there wasn't a soul in sight. We ended up calling the cops because we couldn't accept that it was a ghost or some paranormal crap. I'm still spooked till this day. The house I live in has a wholesome ghost. There was an older couple that lived here before I bought it. The husband died and the wife moved out of state to be with family. Their son was the realtor that sold the house to us. Before we first moved in, I was doing a few things around the house. I noticed the master bathroom toilet leaked from the bottom of the tank. I turned off the water supply and made mental note to fix it later. The next day I came back and absent-mindedly used that toilet. It was a few minutes later that I realized the toilet was in perfect working order without me fixing it. No leak, water turned back on. I was literally the only person, that I know of, that had been in the house. Another time, my wife was home by herself. She was dusting or whatever, and an wall clock we have was tilted slightly askew. She straightened it and turned to go dust the next wall. She heard what she described as someone clearing their throat to get someone's attention and turned to see the clock turned askew again, literally seconds after she had just fixed it. She said it didn't feel threatening. She said it felt like something a guy would do to be a pester. These are just a few of the things that have happened in our house. Well, my English is not very good, but I try my best. I live in a house with 2 stages. I sleep in the first stage. I was alone and it was night when I suddenly heard somebody above walking. I got out of my room and said hello. I thought maybe my patents are back and I haven't heard them. But nobody answered and the noises stopped, so I walked back into my room. 1 minute later I heard again walking above, but this time it got much scarier because out of nowhere the TV was working. I don't get scared very fast, so I walked upstairs and closed the TV. But then when I was again in my room I heard that the TV was back on. I walked again upstairs and wanted to close again the TV, but when I was in front of the TV it closed itself. In this moment I had the goosebumps of my life and I just ran downstairs. I've told this story a few times. When I was much younger, my grandparents lived in a big house about an hour away from our house. Their house belonged to an old doctor who made some significant development in medical science. I don't really remember. I think there were some tragic deaths/murders/suicides associated with that house. I was never told much about them. Basically, I saw multiple ghosts, or at least what I remember to be ghosts. I was never really scared of them because they never seemed too threatening, so I never mentioned it until a few years after my grandparents moved houses. One day when I was older I told my mom about them. She asked me which ones I saw, but before I could list them, she told me the ghosts she saw growing up in that house. The exact same ones I did. I consider that enough proof. As a kid I used to hate going to bed because almost every night shadowy figures would watch me sleep only when I had my back turned and was facing the wall. Or I would hear whispers and noises from my closet. I would feel something watching me, so every time I would turn around in bed to see what it was always shadowy figure standing there watching me sleep, but it would run to my closet once I looked at it. It had footsteps as well. Other times if I covered myself completely in a blanket, kid me thought it actually worked, lol. I could feel something gently touching me as if to scare me. I would uncover myself from the blanket and nothing would be there. I shared a room with my grandmother. So I would wake her up and tell her what I saw, terrified out of my kid mind. She would just tell me it was an after-image projection from the TV. Lamau. I would go some nights without sleeping because of this, but would still hearing whispers from my closet. I've had sleep paralysis before, plus I usually always figure it out and wake up right away, but these incidents sure as hell felt really fucking different. I could move around and talk. Another time I heard evil snickering from my closet. I knew where everyone in my house was, small house. No idea what the hell that was either.
Thanks for watching. Please do like, share, comment and subscribe for more videos.